Theodore Roosevelt brought to foreign affairs a blend that still defines American statecraft: confidence in American strength paired with a real belief in diplomacy. He built up the Navy, helped broker peace between Russia and Japan, work that earned him the Nobel Peace Prize, and took the long view of where America's interests truly lay in the world. This Prairie Side Chat takes up that long view: national interest, strength, diplomacy, and the question of where leaders across political traditions still find common ground of America's role in the world. The conversation is moderated by Matthew Swift, co-founder and CEO of the Concordia Summit and a trustee of this library, in conversation with Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, former United States Ambassador to Japan. Please join me in welcoming Matthew and Ambassador Emanuel. Ambassador, thank you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here at the opening of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library here in Medora, North Dakota. We have so much to talk about because, first off, I know you are an enormous presidential history buff, right? So we have a lot to talk about in terms of the legacy of TR. But what I want to do is have this conversation with you through the lens of your career going backwards, because your career from...
Sometimes my career feels like it's going backwards. How fitting a moment.
Oh,
perfect,
perfect. But we're gonna talk about your time as ambassador, your time as mayor of Chicago, White House chief of staff, member of Congress, time in the Clinton administration, and
you could conclude I can't keep a job.
Oh, that's or just a very active life in public service. But so let's dive right into the foreign policy legacy of President Roosevelt, and of course, how apropos your time as U.S. ambassador to Japan. TR won the Nobel Peace Prize as a result of a peace agreement he did between Russia and Japan. But talk about the legacy that you, as you see it, of TR from a foreign policy lens.
Well, first, a shout out to New Hampshire. He does the Russia-Japan negotiations in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Just one state out of the 50-nation state. Some people get that joke. Second is, look, he redefines America at a critical point. It's getting all this economic power, but he's also to, not just through Russia and Japan, Panama Canal, a new Navy, that America is going to be a global power and a global presence, and felt globally. Obviously, he has the infamous phrase about, speaking softly, etc. And so he defines America, and while obviously there's a post-World War II with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which is the people benchmark that as the American century, the prologue is written by Teddy Roosevelt, both defining the presidency, defining America's role in the world, defining its economic power as a force for good, that for all the challenges America has, etc., it's different than the pre-colonial eras. And that kind of benchmark changes America's position in the world.
How is TR seen from a historical perspective in Japan?
I would not... The Japan I dealt with, so when you live, the American ambassador's residence is where MacArthur lives. It's downstairs, so upstairs there's rooms. Downstairs there's a big room. That is where MacArthur receives the emperor. And while we think of the end of the war as the signing on the Missouri, for the Japanese, that meeting is the end. And if you think about their relationship with America, to be frank, it's really a World War II post. And that's really the definition. There are other moments in the sense of Admiral Perry and the first real ship coming down there and from the United States to Japan, opening up the Japanese market, etc. Admiration, Roosevelt is, if he's thought of, is thought of in the role that he plays in bringing peace between Russia and Japan. But it's really to be America and America etched into the Japanese culture is really a World War II post kind of definition.
Shifting now to your time as mayor of Chicago.
That was it for ambassadorship?
We can keep going if you want.
No, I was just, God, this is like speed dating. I can't, I'm so excited.
Yeah. But all right, so let's shift to your time as mayor of Chicago and politics at a deeply local level, right? When you think about your career and your time, how is it that you see in public service people truly being able to have the kind of impact, right? He transcended.
Well, two things. One is the one race he's disappointed that he doesn't make is mayor for New York. Yeah. When I'm done being mayor, or towards the end, I write a book about, look, I don't think democracy is challenged locally. The farther you get away from a government that's closest to your front door or your back door, the more like D.C. looks like Disneyland on the Potomac. That's where you have fragility. But a government that affects where you live, where you work, and how you play, that's a government people have confidence in, or not. But they normally do in the city of Chicago. Now, pause, I will come right back to that. Everybody thinks that diplomacy is, in your mind's eye, an older gentleman with a pipe, gray flannel suit, double-breasted in a library with an air of smoke around them, thinking big thoughts as if they're all crafting the long memo. As the author of the short tweet, I will just say to you, international affairs diplomacy is just politics. If you can't do politics, you can't do diplomacy. And it's not an accident Jim Baker's book is The Politics of Diplomacy. So if there's one thing I'd say is there's obviously a role for policy. There's a clear understanding of history, clear understanding of the people you're dealing with. But in the end of the day, the most successful people in our diplomatic area were people that actually understood politics. Because if you can't understand that person's, and I can give an anecdote from my time in Japan about that, you can't really do diplomacy. And so I would, now, being mayor, as I joke sometimes, there's 5 great jobs in public life. President, governor of California, governor of New York, mayor of New York, or mayor of the city of Chicago. And my joke is that I've done 1.5 of these jobs. And so it is a job that has the highest highs. When I was mayor, we said, first city to do this, if you got a B average in high school, we made community college free. And the relief in parents' eyes when we said, okay, you don't have to pick which child goes to college. Your child learned to be going for free, get in the first 2 years. Thank you. Don't stop, no. On the other hand, I made it a practice that if an officer was shot or a child was shot, I would go to the hospital and be by the family side. It's the lowest of lows. And after 8 years of it, there's a Yiddish word, it just take the neshama out of you, your whole soul was taken from you. And so it is the greatest because you can see and do things that are not possible at the national level you can do. We created universal kindergarten and universal pre-K. Never existed before. We went from the shortest school day in America to the first full school day. We added 4 years to a kid's education in Chicago. So some of the stuff is unbelievable. And being willing to, in the great tradition of TR, not accept the status quo as given, but to be challenged. But I joke, when I started mayor, I was 6'2" and 250 pounds. I'm now 5'8" and 148 dripping wet. But it's the greatest of highs and the lowest of lows.
Have you seen, one of the things that we've talked, and has been part of a lot of the conversations here, has been that how would TR have adapted to the rate of change? You think about everything that he did in his time in public service, but how would he have adapted in this era to just the rapid rate of things changing, especially with technology and artificial intelligence? For you in your time in public service, and especially as mayor, how did you grapple with that?
So I'm going to tell you one funny. So when I'm mayor, I take public transportation, which also when I was ambassador, I had to spend 8 weeks fighting with the State Department that I could take the train in Japan. They said, I worry about your safety. I said, look, if you're worried about my safety, I need you when I was mayor of Chicago, not in Japan, okay? Don't worry. And in Taiwan, in Japan, they're just excited that the ambassador's on the train. In Chicago, it's a different story, okay? Now, obviously, Doris Kearns Goodwin would be better at this than me, but, remember, TR becomes president. You're going from rural to urban. You're going from agriculture to industrial. And so the speed of change wasn't exactly slow. In fact, obviously he grapples with the inequity of that change. I think this moment is most relevant to why this library is so important, because when you look at what he was facing, it wasn't a guaranteed we would go with the square deal. It wasn't a guaranteed we go with greater equity and willing to use the public space to counter the concentration of power. That was not a guarantee. Many people thought the country was coming apart at the seams. When you look at the debates around immigration, you look at debates, what is William Jennings Bryan's entire campaign, of which there are 3 presidentials, are all about taking on that change and saying no. Roosevelt takes the more progressive course, sees the public sector and, most importantly, the government as the counterweight to that concentration of power. And it wasn't predestined, but he wrote the script for it. And I think he would not look at just the speed of change. I would actually say that he would look at this moment and talk about the concentration of power, both economic, media, and political, as a purpose for trust busting. I think that's what he would say. It was not just about the speed of change. The only person that knows, she just walked out, so we have to go grab her. But that's what I would think that he would say. And that's why I think the lessons from this library, and this is not just a cheer, we're all here at the library, we all think it's important. I think he would see this moment in the similarities in that kind of power. And the reason that when he's both governor of New York, and even when he's facing his first reelect in 2004, the party power was against him was because he was willing to take on that concentration of power and wealth. And they were not happy with it because it was a threat to their own political power.
So that's a good segue, I think, into talking a bit about the presidency, what role he, of course, as president played, following McKinley's death,
Yeah.
all of a sudden becoming president, but how brave it was to go against these giant industrialists that had so much power today. Do you see, 25% of the S&P 500 are now the big tech companies, right? And talking about that parallel, do you see leadership today in American politics to where our leaders are willing to stand up to that kind of concentration of wealth and power that exists today?
Well, that's going to be a test. Look, if you look at every great moment in American history, specifically we'll talk about TR, but that could be true about FDR, true also about Wilson, and then also true about Abraham Lincoln, and then Andrew Jackson. When you have that kind, and the one president that doesn't get, because it's so short, that I think could have been this is Garfield, but it's 6 months. I think he truly could have been one of the greats. But in those period of times where there is economically the concentration of power, the political and legal and tax codes push against that concentration and rebalance it. I think you probably could tell by the way I'm pleading, I'm not a big fan of this Supreme Court, because I think when you look at it today, the other pieces that would push against are accelerating the speed of that concentration in a very unhealthy way for the country. That's why you have the type of politics that are going on, both in the Democratic Party, and you could also argue in the Republican Party, because of that extreme. And I don't think that we're a unique country. Let me say this. If you thought of New York as where capital, because of the stock market, lives, and D.C. is a separation between political power and economic power geographically. That is not true in London. That is not true in Paris. That is not true in Berlin, where both the concentration of their political and economic capital is in the same capital. In America, it's divided and broken. And I don't think Washington is in its traditional norm. I actually do think, and then I'll paraphrase or go forward on 2028, I think one of the challenges for our country is in the last 20 years, we've had two presidents from two parties that have looked about restoring a past that is not coming back. What's exciting to me about 2028, and if I'm reckless enough to decide to do this, is that this will be the first election in 20 years, and I say 20 since Obama 08, where the future will be on the ballot, not the past. And I think the country is due that debate and that discussion that's really important. And there's not a plea to make a partisan remark, but I do think that concentration of political power and economic power is due to be broken up and be dealt with. And we're living through a period of time where the normal role of Congress or the judiciary hasn't been a counterweight, but it's accelerated that concentration.
I did ask a historian recently what that person felt about what the founding fathers would have thought of our current president. And it was very, very interesting, the response, which was the presidency in a way was designed to absorb certain types of people, but the real anger would have been at Congress and not being this correction of power that they should be.
Look, I mean, I think I don't want to get off track here from my biography, which I'm most excited about. But let's take a deviation road on Highway 66 here, okay? Look, there's a reason you have three branches of government, and it was actually designed for equilibrium. And I think one of the problems you've had is, in fact, members of the court have been acting, in my view, in a partisan way rather than a historic legal manner. And the Congress has not done its role, not just in oversight, but as a counterweight. Listen, as a former member of Congress and then a former chief of staff and a former mayor, it's ugly, it's not pretty, sausage making, but at the end of the day, you get the right result. And they've laid down from their responsibility. And it was actually an incredible leap of faith in the three branches of government to work both in unison and against each other. And that's not happened, and we're paying the price for it. Now, I want to say, I'm not an apologist. Donald Trump is a manifestation of something going on. He happens, in my view, to accelerate it in the worst. But the way I look at it is the moment that the American dream became unaffordable and inaccessible to the American people is exactly when our democracy becomes unstable. I'm for same-day voting. I'm for mail-in ballots. You want to restore democracy and the confidence in democracy? Make sure that it's not the age of 40 for your first time home. Go back to 26. Make sure that when you get a college education, your parents don't go into the poorhouse and you don't go into their basement when you graduate and you get a lifetime of invoices for college education. Make sure that when parents are saving for their retirement, it's not their 401k is not a backstop for their paycheck. The moment that became unaffordable is exactly when our democracy starts to become unstable. And that's the product of it.
So building on the affordability piece, though, when you look back at your time as chief of staff while managing the...
It's a little like Ed Monk's painting The Scream. Yeah.
Well, but let's talk about the Great Recession, though.
Must we?
And too big to fail. As a result of that era, though,
yeah,
a higher concentration in banks, right? We've even recently, in the last few years, lost some of those banks that took risks on entrepreneurs. Why is that happening?
So in the interest of playing the central role in my own story, if history had only listened, no. But there's a story that happens. So we get, in the first 4 months, we get the President's Recovery Act, Kids Health Care sign, get the auto industry back surviving past 6 weeks. get the plan for Iraq launched, et cetera, to end the war. So in the spring of '09, 4 months into his presidency, and the reason I remember this is because I was supposed to go home. Amy and the kids were still living in Chicago for Zachariah's birthday. And I can't make it because the president calls this big meeting on a Saturday. Pause. He makes it up to us. Zach has his birthday at Camp David. Doesn't everybody, when they're 11 years old, have their birthday at Camp David? It's a normal thing. A cake cooked by the Navy. It happens to everybody. So we have this big meeting in the Roosevelt Room, which is right off the Oval, and it's to pick among the president's 3 children, as we used to call it: healthcare, financial reform, and cap and trade. So the long cabinet table, president sitting here, vice president's on the one side, I'm on the left, and then around are the policy and political people, and it's a layer deep, some of the other stuff. And it's a 5-hour meeting on a Saturday. As I used to say in the White House, thank God it's Friday, 2 more work days till Monday. And I look down there because on the other side of the table in the corner are the domestic policy and political people, and they say, correctly, every day you don't do health care is a day you're not going to get health care done. And if you look at the history of health care, especially here, first person to call for national health care, Teddy Roosevelt. And going through Medicare, Medicaid, Hillary Care, if you don't start, because the moment you announce it, it's just altitude down. That's the history. And they are right in their legislative clock. The economic team sitting on the other side of the Roosevelt table over here, you know, just stop doing stuff. It just needs to heal so we can get a recovery going, et cetera. I know you find it hard to believe, but this end of the table, called Tammany Hall in the White House, I said, look, after the TARP and after your Recovery Act was another $800 billion. Back then, $1.5 trillion was a lot of money. I said the country needs to see you taking on the banks and the insurance companies. I said the political system needs Old Testament justice. They need to see you take a banker, South Lawn, just slap them silly. 10 o'clock. Live, CNN, wacko, you just whack the crap out of them. And I said, look, the one thing I know from being in the Clinton White House, that if you want to pass health care, pharmaceutical, insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, they got to sit on this side of the table with you. You take on financial reform, the banks and insurance CEOs will be on the other side, and you'll be fighting them. And the country needs to see you beating the crap out of them. Breaking news, I lost that fight. You got health care where if you have pre-existing conditions, it's passed. It's the law of the land. You also got the Tea Party. You got both. And one thing I know from the Oval Office is what goes into the Oval Office is bad and worse. Good and bad, the Chief of Staff will handle. The only thing he lets through to the President of the United States is bad and worse. And the President made a decision. You get 307, and he decided health care is in front of everything else. Everything else will be secondary. And when you look at the history of the country, et cetera, that's the decision. It's a good decision. It's a better decision. My dad was a pediatrician. My mother was a nurse. That's a great decision. But every decision is not 100% this way and 0 on the other side. And I think when you look at the Obama presidency, and you look on the fact that we're bailing out a bunch of banks and people lose their home, you have a line from the Tea Party forward that basically rocks American politics. And I don't mean I lost the debate, but you have to pick between they're right, if you don't do health care, you're probably not going to do health care, or do you take on the financial industry, which would have taken the venom out of our politics? And those are the choices you make.
So if we're going to have this...
And as you notice, that really smart Chief of Staff gave some very sage political advice.
But with this reckoning that is in our future, most likely, we have the first trillionaire. We have a growing class divide. Affordability continues to be at the forefront. As you've alluded to, the ability to buy a home is very different from what it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So this reckoning, where does politics fit into it? Are we in for a pendulum swing for the next election cycles?
Yeah. Well, I would actually call it also an opportunity, not just inequality gap, but an opportunity gap. And I can say this, I mean, I don't know everybody in this room, but, you know, Amy and my kids are going to be great. Loving home, good education, start off right. We have a system that's rigged, so now we happen to think, Amy and I, we think we did a pretty good job. We high-five each other periodically and think we did, you know. But you can't have 80% of the kids and families looking through the window and watching the other 20% do great and keep doing great. I mean, look, I grew up in a time where a college education was your pre-TSA punch into the middle class, and when we grew up with the norm, what does it mean that you do better? Your benchmark's your parents. Today, you graduate, the average child graduates with $30,000 in debt, a lifetime of invoices, and it's a direct ticket into your parents' basement. Your mom and dad sell that house, you and your laundry come with it. That's crazy. My kids won't, and Amy's kids, they won't face that. Now, one of the great things, I don't mean to always bring it back, but we are in this auditorium here at the TR Library. What is the premise of the square deal? There is no guarantee on the outcome, but guarantee on the chance of success. And if we're right, from college education, look at owning a home. Average age in a decade has gone from 26 to 40. It is rigged. You are actually encouraged, the whole tax code is written not for wealth creation, but wealth preservation. 3 weeks ago, an unassuming headline in the Wall Street Journal, a weekend retreat to help kids figure out how to handle their inheritance. Are you kidding me? Those kids deserve a hit. You're like lucky. It was like not even any self-doubt about it. And to me, there is a wealth gap, but it's actually underpinned by an opportunity gap. Now, I happen to have a passion personally for education. I was going to be prior to public service in education. But we have an opportunity gap, and people are angry, and they're not wrong. The system is rigged. And I think that's what's driving both the political turbulence here, the political turbulence in the rest of the developed world, but I think most importantly that people are going to be lashing out for somebody to create a politics that doesn't so much as break up that wealth, but doesn't allow that wealth to have a greater say in the future of this country than those who work also. And I don't think that's like a radical idea.
But if you look at the results of primaries, and let's talk about Republicans and Democrats, but let's start with Democrats. If you look at the recent results in some of these primaries.
Do you promise me we'll get to the Republican primary too then?
Absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. But if you look at the result of these Democratic primaries in New York, Colorado, California, what is it saying about the future of the Democratic Party, and where do you fit into this space?
Again, my favorite subject, me. Okay. So no, look, I'll say what I've always believed. I got 5 things I want to say. One, I built my career helping President Clinton get elected, re-elected President Obama, helping make Nancy Pelosi Speaker, etc. I'm not interested in somebody taking a blue district and turning it cobalt blue. Cobalt blue doesn't give you the minimum wage increase. Cobalt blue doesn't return to Congress to being an equal branch of government. I'm interested in red to blue. Now, my new color, navy blue. And the reason my new color is, you have across this country, Nancy LaCour in South Carolina, a woman in New Jersey. Former Navy, Nancy in South Carolina, was fired by Hegseth, 3-star general. She's taking on, in the old Mace district, That's a Republican district. She can make it a blue. So my new color, not blue, not cobalt blue. I'm into navy blue, because those are the people that are going to give you a minimum wage. Those are going to be people that are going to figure out how to expand health care. Third, or second, to my fellow Democrats, two great social policies: ACA health care and IRA. Regardless, I don't want to get into the merits of all the bills, et cetera. I spent till 2 in the morning negotiating with Bill Nelson in Nebraska, or a Democrat in a Republican state. That was the 60th vote for health care. The IRA is Joe Manchin, a Democrat in West Virginia. You want to get progressive legislation, you want to get this legislation to move this country forward, you got to flip red to blue. President Obama, when he was president, had 9 Democratic senators. No, it was 13 Democratic senators from 9 states that he lost. That's how you create a majority, and that is how you win. Turning districts blue to cobalt blue, I'm not really impressed. Nancy Pelosi would never have become the first woman speaker, and Barack Obama would not have become the first president of the United States. So you find me people that know navy blue, that's my new color, and that's what I'm for. And the party, and I'm sorry, and Democratic Socialists, I'm a big, broad bass. I'm a former ballet dancer. I'm really flexible. But I'm not flexible enough to have people in our party that say, Putin's not the problem, NATO was that incited Putin. I'm not giving Putin a pass for invading Ukraine on the 5th year of a war. I'm not for people that says we're going to have open borders, or that we're not going to deport people with a criminal background, or we should defund the police. I'm not that flexible. And I actually believe, and again, coming back to why we're here, Roosevelt figured out a capitalism that didn't allow the concentration of war. Well, what is the premise of the square deal is that it worked for everybody. He created more winners, not just a few. And these folks don't believe in capitalism. I do. I believe in it so much, I happen to think this corruption right now is antithetical to the capitalist system. It was built on the rule of law, not on the rule of one. Now, I don't mean to get it, I'm getting a little water weight loss here because I'm really getting honked off. I thought we were going to have a nice discussion. But it's really, I mean, when you think about what's happened here, so I'm not open, I mean, they're not really interested in the Democratic Party. And one last thing, since I do politics, and politics is not far from policy. In the last 3 presidentials, 7 states and 500,000 voters across those 7 states have decided who is president in 2016, 2020, and 2024. One of those states is Georgia. What's the over-under that Senator Ossoff will have a socialist come down to Georgia to campaign for him? You don't need Polymarket for this one. Okay? Cooper in North Carolina, another one of the battleground states. You're not going to have a Democratic Socialist run in any of these states or be invited by any gubernatorial or Senate candidate to come campaign for them. So and if you can't do that there, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, I ain't interested. Iowa, I think we have a good shot of winning the governor's race. You think there's going to be a Democratic Socialist being invited in to campaign for him? I'll buy the ticket. You can put out, I'll buy the ticket for the first time that our candidate, the Democratic candidate, Sand, invites a Democratic Socialist to come into Iowa to campaign for him for the general election. Won't happen, so it doesn't mean anything. No disrespect to the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm not that impressed. It's really a discussion between the East Side of Manhattan with the West Side of Manhattan. That's not really a discussion about America. Thank you for the therapy.
All right, shifting to the Republicans.
Oh, I thought we were going to deal with my kindergarten years.
Oh, no. Okay. On the Republican side, first, let's just talk about the midterms. The candidates that have been selected, Texas, for sure. And I think this dynamic, and this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about, is how you navigate politics in a dynamic where essentially President Trump is more powerful than the party. It seems. His choices, his endorsements completely shift primaries today, right? Do you see that coming from a position of strength as we go into November for Republicans?
Well, one is, like I said, 2028 is going to be about the future. The truth is both parties are going to have a big, big debate. Republicans haven't had that. Democrats haven't. 2024, we didn't have a debate. We got told who our nominee is. 2020, Bernie versus Joe Biden. That was not a debate. That was like, okay, get this over. It's true about 2016. Other side, they're going to decide whether there's a post-Trump Republican Party. Both parties are, you know, my joke is that our party hasn't had a real primary, that we're going to have Baskin & Robbins, 31 flavors. And if I decide to do this, I'm going to be Rocky Road. That's my flavor. That's what I'm going to be. But the Republicans are going to have that too. And I have as an amateur student of Donald Trump, I'm not so sure he's eager for a Republican Party success. I think he wants to show that this party cannot live or exist without me. So don't be so sure that he wants a good, healthy debate, and don't be so sure he wants Republican success without Donald Trump.
So then,
that's just cheap psychology, but that's what I think.
but so then when you go to 2028 on the Republican side and think about a Rubio versus a Vance, what role is President Trump going to play
If
in that?
Vance is not a candidate, don't assume you're not going to have governors and other senators run. And don't assume that he runs. So I always would have said if the vice president wants it, the vice president gets it. I don't make that assumption anymore because of Donald Trump and because of the Republican. Both parties are due for a massive, healthy house cleaning and understanding of who they are, what they they have a big debate. Donald Trump kind of airbrushed that out. In 2016, 2020, 2024, we airbrushed it out. And the party and the country will be better for that debate.
But if I'm understanding what you're saying, though, are you saying the Democrats are having that debate? You're also saying Republicans are having that debate?
Yes, they are. They're going to have it. And I don't think Donald Trump's going to enjoy it. And I'm going to enjoy watching him not enjoy it.
Back to TR for a minute.
Well, all right, since you won't ask me this question, I just want you to know, when I was dating Amy, my mother gave her my first grade report card. And Ms. Wentworth said, Rahm likes cleanup time, even after cleanup time. And never has that been more true. So I want you to know. I had to get to my kindergarten years, and I'm okay. No, forget about it. You don't want to talk about it? I don't care. You think I'm offended? Not a chance. Go ahead.
I was about to ask you about your ballet career.
Yeah, ask whatever you want.
But no, I guess what I want to just push back on, though, is this notion of this reckoning and how our politics evolve from the time that we are in today, especially when there is so little trust.
Yeah.
And there also is such a dramatic generational divide.
That's very important. I mean, one is, look, I mean, I think in the last 25 years, there are 4 big moments in America that are massively disrupted that forget, oh, you shouldn't have done this on bathrooms or transport. Forget all that. 2002, you have a war in Iraq built on yellow cake from Niger, which did not exist. 50,000 of our fellow citizens either die or are maimed for life. And the people responsible never, ever pay a professional price for one of the, in my view, great foreign policy failures. 4 years later, 7 million of our fellow citizens lose their homes on a thing called liar loans. And no banker ever loses a job or pays a day of their career. 4 years later, Xi comes to power in China, and Battle Creek, Michigan, and Bismarck, North Dakota are allowed to take on Beijing, China, all by themselves. And I don't have to tell you how that turns out. And then 6 years later, you have COVID show up, and essential workers are told to go out and do what they're supposed to do, and everybody else gets remote work. Now, when you look at those 25 years, there's a reason the younger generations lost confidence. You tell me what that gives them, they're supposed to have confidence in. We as a country look like, outside of, no disrespect, but in the vaccine, we look like we can't organize a one-car parade. That's what America looks like. So if you're growing up in this period of time and over the last 25 years, I don't think there's a place for cynicism, but you can get pretty dark and pretty pessimistic and pretty angry. Everything that you were growing up with, the certain values and premises of that contract, is busted. So I get that. Now, I happen to think, whether you go to the turn of the century, you go to the Civil War, you go to the Great Depression, you go even back, obviously, in the early days of the Republic, we have faced other great, you go to the 60s, great challenges. This is not the first challenge, and this is not the first period of cynicism. This is not the first period of darkness, or a very bad, dark cloud over America. The question is, do you have a leader that steers it, as Lincoln says, noted, to our better angels? I don't think these problems are Donald Trump's making. My challenge about him is that he every day takes salt and puts it in that wound. Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, just to take 3 presidents, each of them found a way to heal a country that was divided, a country that was divided against itself, and a country that had lost doubt in itself. That's not true today. And I do think the ugliness of our politics, we have the opportunity in 2028 and beyond to actually produce both a leader and a politics and a polity that will nudge the country back to finding its footing again. And I say this, I just did something with Ted on a podcast. You know, when I was ambassador, to go full circle, since it's 2 minutes left, we had a great time, learned a tremendous amount about Japan, a tremendous amount about the Indo-Pacific. The country I learned most about was the United States of America. 8,000 miles away, 12 hours away earlier. I used to say to my kids, I've seen Thursday, it's not that great, don't get out of bed. We grew up with an ethos that failure was not an option. 50% of our kids are not reading at grade level, and nobody says anything. Not a mayor, not a governor, not a president. Like, okay, 30%, 50% can't read. 2 weeks ago, we had a report, lowest level of math scores in a generation. Now, you know more about our president's position on windmills than reading scores. This is a crisis. And I don't know how, and I say this, China doesn't scare me. I'm not scared of them. I'm scared of a country that lost the will. They don't decide whether we're complacent with 50% of our kids not reading. They don't decide whether we have a 20th century energy system. We decide that. They don't decide whether we cut the National Institute of Health, the greatest research operation of the National Science Foundation the world has ever seen. We decide that. And we have somehow, as a country, become okay with failure as long as we and our kids are okay. If everybody else's kids aren't, that's life. Now, my thing, and I said this to Ted, I'm not into 1% being defined by wealth. I'm into the 1% that have volunteered to serve this country in the armed forces. That, to me, is the true 1%. Not how much they've acquired, but we're going to measure the 1% by how much they gave. And if we do that, our politics and our country will be okay. And nobody, I'd say this to China, watch out, we're coming for you. But if we keep doing what we're doing and don't change and don't return to the values that built this country, we got trouble.
In closing, what?
That was my close.
Oh, that was your. Oh, we're done. We're done.
I'm waiting for
We have-
my
we have
ballet
20
question.
seconds.
Okay, go.
All right.
Okay.
To
U.S.
br-
history for 200.
Oh, to bring it back home though, because we are in Medora.
I've noticed.
Yeah. What is the single most important lesson to you about the life and legacy of TR?
Well, this is a student of presidents. Every president has a crisis where they discover themselves, pre the presidency, sometimes in the presidency. Look, I mean, since I talked to him the other day, I have admiration for George 43 Bush. He overcame alcoholism. That was a crisis for him. And he discovered who George Bush was and what George Bush was made of. If you listen to him and hear him. Roosevelt comes here. Does he discover America? He discovers Teddy Roosevelt here. And he'll say that. He will say that. Bill Clinton, who obviously I'm very close to, takes his adopted father's name, but stops his adopted father from beating the crap out of his mother. That was Bill Clinton's moment, where he both took the name, but discovered who he was and what he was made of. That is, you could go to Abraham Lincoln, you could go to polio for Franklin Roosevelt. Every one of them have their own crisis, and they turn that pain into a purposefulness of public life that actually defines their character and the spirit that they bring to the presidency.
Well, I want to say, Rahm, especially when reading.
It's ambassador to you.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, man. Thank God the clock's done.
After that therapy, I needed that.
No, but what I was going to say is I followed your career for a very, very long time. And one of the things that I love about TR is he loves the debate. He loves being with people he disagrees with. But you got to land on a solution. And your career from ambassador, White House chief of staff, working in the Clinton administration, in Congress, mayor of Chicago, you're always focused on the solution. And so it's a real honor to be on stage with you today. So thank you.
As I always say, politics is not the place for the paralysis of analysis. At some point, make a decision. All right.